My name is Mandy Watson, as Josh mentioned. So I am a fur bearer and small game mammal biologist in our central office in Albany. And I'm gonna be talking a little bit about some of our small game mammals. So that would be, rabbits, hares, squirrels, some of those, and then also focus a lot on some of this community science. So these different ways that we're getting information. As Josh already mentioned, our agency overall really, really does rely on you, the public, to help us with some of our management of our wildlife species. It's difficult to cover large areas. It's difficult to get large sample sizes. So this information is really critical for us, and I'm going to be talking about that. All right, so first off, I'm going to start talking about, the value of our hunters and trappers. We rely very heavily on our hunters and trappers to help us with wildlife management. As if you guys are hunters and trappers, I'm sure that you know this. You've probably received one of our many surveys that we send out that Josh talked about a little bit. So we often call on you all to help us kind of better understand, provide additional information to help us better understand some of our wildlife populations. So just kind of touching on some of this that we've done in the past is we have asked rabbit hunters who are hunting in specific counties that tend to be in the southeastern part of the state in our regions 3 and 4 to actually submit the heads of any harvested rabbits, and then we will test those to see whether they are New England cottontails, which are a native and threatened species, or Eastern cottontails, which are a much more common species that are found throughout the state. And that's really helped us kind of get a really good handle on where New England cottontails are in the state, which has been very helpful for our staff as we move forward, kind of doing some habitat management and whatnot to try to help this population out. Some other examples as well from the fur bearer side of things, we frequently will ask hunters and trappers to turn in teeth of any harvested animals. And what we do with that is we actually send it off to get tested. So there's a couple of different labs throughout the country that are able to test the teeth to see the age of the animal. So we can really get an idea of what the age structure of our animals are, which is very, very helpful. We did that for bobcat about 10 years or so ago now, which helped us have a better understanding of that population. We can go out and we can trap bobcats, but we're never going to get close to the number of bobcats that are harvested. So it's really more representative, tells us what's going on there. Um, and one really interesting project that we have that's currently going on is this regional gray fox and fisher health study. So we have actually asked trappers and hunters who harvest gray foxes and fisher to submit the carcasses of the animals to our biologists, and then we're sending them off to veterinary pathologists to actually do full necropsies on them, to do a bunch of testing, to try to get a really full picture of the health of these species. And some of the reasons why the focus is on these species is because gray foxes have shown what seems to be a regional decline in certain areas. So in New York, they seem to be doing okay, but there's certain areas where it seems like their population has declined. In other areas like the Midwest, it really seems like they've experienced a potentially significant population decline. So we're focused on them to try to get a real good look at kind of our gray foxes and what threats they may be facing from a health perspective. And fishers as well, mostly because we actually collected carcasses from trappers several years ago, and we found that fishers tended to have pretty high rates of what's known as anticoagulant rodenticide. So it's this kind of rodenticide that they were ingesting, likely through ingesting small mammals that had directly eaten the rodenticide. And it can cause some pretty severe health impacts to wildlife. We're still kind of working on understanding the real health risk better, but essentially it can lead to some pretty significant bleeding It's anticoagulant, so it makes it so that they have trouble clotting, and then they're more susceptible to potentially bleeding to death. So we picked these two species, and we actually just got some preliminary results, which was kind of exciting. So far, 100% of the fisher that we submitted, that New York submitted, which was about 11 animals, or sorry, 20 fisher and then 11 gray foxes. So for the fisher, 100% of those and 2/3 of the gray foxes have been exposed to anticoagulant rodenticides. And really interestingly as well, we found that gray foxes seem to be exposed to a fairly large number of heavy metals, such as lead. So about 75% of gray foxes across the Northeast actually have some levels of lead, cadmium, and arsenic. So those heavy metals. So like I said, we're still trying to figure out what exactly this may mean, but it is, just kind of interesting seeing that this wildlife is exposed to some of these threats that we may not have thought that much of. All right. So another part of this study was looking at canine parvovirus as well as distemper, but the parvovirus is really interesting to me. So parvovirus, if anyone has a dog, you likely have heard of parvovirus. Most dogs are vaccinated for it, and it can be deadly in dogs, especially for puppies and young dogs. And so out of the fisher and gray foxes that were tested, we found that a pretty high number. So, 4 out of 10 total gray foxes and 9 out of 19 total fisher, so close to 40 to 50%, were actually positive for canine parvovirus. And these are from animals that were primarily hunter and trapper submitted. So these are presumably healthy animals, at least behaving in a healthy manner, not sick animals that are then being tested, that are coming back as positive for canine parvovirus. And this is, I think it is pretty interesting just from a human health and safety note that this is happening, and because of the possibility for transmission to dogs, it is, just something to be aware of. If you do hunt foxes, hunt fur bearers, or if you trap, being aware that this is a disease that seems to be out on the landscape in our wildlife, and then taking precautions to make sure that your dogs aren't coming into contact with any carcasses that you have, and also, disinfecting areas where you may process any fur bearers, and also just getting your dogs vaccinated are all really, really important here to protect your dogs. So we are still collecting additional gray foxes for this research. We have enough fisher samples, but they are looking for more gray foxes. So if you hunt gray foxes and are interested in submitting samples to the study, you can reach out directly to us. So we're interested in taking whatever you may have. You can reach out to your regional wildlife office. Otherwise, email wildlife@dec.ny.gov, or you can call the phone number on the screen there, and we can arrange some kind of pickup for this. So that's just, one example of some community science that we are currently involved with, that is really interesting. It's ongoing. It's some cool research. As for other folks, so if you don't hunt or trap, don't worry, we have plenty of opportunities for you to still help out with stuff. So Josh mentioned earlier our fur bearer sighting survey. So this is an online survey. You can find it on our website. You can scan that QR code on the slide there. Or you can just go on our website and then search fur bearer sighting survey, and it will bring you there. And this is essentially this form where we're asking folks to submit any sightings of fur bearers that you see. Fur bearers and some of our rare small game mammals, or not necessarily rare, but those that are not seen as often. So I see that somebody asked about if there's interest in roadkill reports, and this is where we definitely have interest in roadkill reports. So it can be roadkill that you see. It can be trail camera pictures. It can be just a sighting. We get a lot of videos from Ring and Blink cameras as well. And you can upload those photos to the survey, and that just kind of helps us really look and confirm the sightings and whatnot. And this data is actually really, really useful for us. So, you know, it helps us better understand where this wildlife is found throughout the state. So a lot of these species like weasels, and as well as our fisher and bobcats, they're not seen very often. We know that they're around and they can be found throughout the state, but we just don't see them. So this is a really good way for us to learn a little bit more about them, figure out what habitats they're using, anything with their behavior. It does really help us too, because most of our projects that DEC does tends to be focused on public land, on more remote areas. And this gives us really important information from those urban and suburban areas where we know that there's wildlife using these areas, but we just don't always sample it. So this is super, super helpful for that. And I will just note, you know, we don't ever share any information. We don't share locations with the public. We sometimes get some concerns there. But we are looking for this, and we do use this data. So in general, we're not necessarily looking for sightings of everything, but we're looking for some of our more elusive species. So that does include some of our fur bearers like bobcats, fishers, gray foxes, martins, river otters, and weasels. And then we're looking for some of our species that we really don't understand that well, such as fox squirrels and snowshoe hares as well. So if you guys ever have any sightings of fox squirrels or snowshoe hares, we definitely want to hear about it, and we would love for you to report to this survey. In New York City and Long Island, those are some areas that we're interested in, a few more different species. So we're also interested in learning about any sightings of beaver, mink, coyotes, and skunks as well, just to get a better idea of kind of where they are found. And I'm just going to kind of show you really quickly here, as long as this works. Some information. So it's going to be a broad scale. So, you know, you can't necessarily see exactly where they are, but this is our fur bearer sighting database. You can see we have gotten over 1.4 thousand sightings. And this just went live about a year ago. So this has been about a year. We've gotten over 1,000 sightings, which is really, really exciting. And we can look at it. And one of the things I just wanted to show folks was snowshoe hare. You can see that so we can also sort, like I said, you can include photos. So if we look at all of our snowshoe hare sightings, we really haven't gotten that many. So like I said, you know, we're very interested in that. And then as well, our fox squirrels here, we have gotten just one report. And we can see some details on this fox squirrel. This was actually a roadkill animal. It was actually submitted by Tim, who is on this call. He's a DEC biologist. So we're definitely very interested in fox squirrels. But you can see it's just kind of, you know, this gives us really good information. Like I said, DEC staff can look at this and we can see some details. We can look at trail camera pictures to see, yes, that is a gray fox, and we can confirm that. And so this is very, very useful for us, and I would very much encourage folks to report their sightings. And I do see that there's a question about carcasses, roadkill carcasses. So right now, we would be interested in fresh carcasses for gray foxes to take some of those samples that for that gray fox study that I mentioned. They do have to be relatively fresh so that we can do all of the disease sampling and whatnot. But if you do see some, I would recommend, rather than reporting it to the Public Sighting Survey, giving us a call. So calling either your regional office, likely your regional office is the best bet. And then we can kind of get out there to collect those samples. And at any other time, we would just kind of recommend, if it's an older carcass, doesn't seem like it's super fresh, still report it on our fur bearer sighting survey, but we won't be taking samples. So thank you very much for offering or for asking that question. All right. So moving on from that, Josh also mentioned this project, Snapshot New York. So this is a new project. It just launched in June of this year. It's a collaborative project between DEC and Cornell University that's really looking at using a trail camera network to monitor wildlife across New York. And there's a couple of different components of this. So we do have a DEC component where DEC staff are going out and setting up trail cameras. But then there's also a public component, so a citizen science component, where we have the public volunteering to put out trail cameras and then send those photos to us, and then we can get an idea of what species we have, where they are throughout the state. We can use that information to better guide our management, so we can use it for, you know, our big game. So bear and deer are some of our high priority species, so that we can use that to set any, you know, tag allocations, adjust the season structure as needed, anything like that. And we're also very interested, so some of our other target species as well are bobcats, fishers, some of those more rare species that we're just working on better understanding where they are throughout the state, such as gray foxes and weasels, and then also turkeys as well. So not only can we tell whether these species are in an area, which is helpful, but, you know, we can get some additional information as well. So we can get some information on reproduction. So looking at does and fawns, looking at turkeys, the hens to poult ratios. We can get a lot of really cool information from this camera project. So our goal is to kind of monitor these trends of these species over time, and then help guide management and give us a lot of really good information so that we can better manage these species. And like the Fur Bearer Sighting Survey, one of the real big draws of a project like this is that it does help us sample these areas that are difficult for DEC to get to. So over 60% of New York is made up of private land, and it's hard for us to sample private land. So having folks go out there, a lot of folks are already setting out trail cameras, and you can just use your own trail camera, set it out, and then just share some images with us, you know, and then help us with wildlife management. It's a really good way to get engaged, and to really play a role in this work, which I think is pretty neat. So like I mentioned, this just launched this June, and we have gotten some really, really good results. So basically the state of New York is divided into a bunch of grid cells, and then folks can reserve a grid cell and put out a camera. And we've gotten over 800 members of the public who have reserved these grid cells to put cameras out. So in this map on this slide here, you can see that there is these blue dots, so that those are members of the public or citizen scientists who have put out cameras. And then the red ones are actually DEC cameras, so we're working on kind of the smaller scale. But we've gotten really, really good participation, which is awesome. You know, if this is something you may be interested in, I highly encourage you to check out the website. So that's snapshotny.org. And you can get some more information on this project. All that you really need is the ability to set out a camera. So we do have a limited number of cameras that are available for a loan. At this time, they've all been loaned out, so we're mostly relying on folks who have their own camera, but you can go on a wait list if you don't have a camera of your own. And then, you know, you upload the photos to the website once you get an account. So it's overall pretty easy. We're definitely, you know, if you have any questions on this, I'd be happy to answer them. You can drop your questions in that Q&A box, and we'll answer them as they come in. But if this is something that you think you may be interested in, I definitely highly recommend it. As you can see from our map, we've got some pretty good coverage, but we're always looking for more folks to become involved, especially if you happen to live in the northern part of New York, also Long Island as well. So if you live in any of those areas, we definitely highly encourage you.